We have Brian Little, who represented Stephen Metcalfe because he couldn't make it. He read out a presentation from Stephen. We had a local councillor from the Conservative Party, Stephen Hillier, and we had Kerry Smith. And credit to all of them, none of them did any political bandstanding. We wouldn't allow that because always reinforce the point this is a politically neutral group. We will work with everybody, and hopefully they will work back with us. We're amazed at just how many leaflets have been printed at people's own costs. And I know, you'll know how much printing cartridges could cost. So, how many have been printed and how many have been distributed around the area, going wider and wider. And the shocking thing about it is that just so many people still don't know about this major impact of this development. I've raised an objection. I wrote to Stephen Metcalfe. I said to him, this study should be stopped because I don't think something of this major impact should be rushed through in 6 weeks with such scant information coming out from the Basildon Council. In fact, it was rather ironic. When I was speaking to the council planning officers last week, and I was saying to the lady there, this is wrong, you've not given enough information, it's under the radar. And she said, well, Mr. Fellows, we find that sending letters to all addresses isn't very successful. And I'll give you my word, as she was saying that, there was an envelope come through my front door, who from Basildon Council, saying, this is what we think, your resident, people in your house for the upcoming election. It works through people's letterbox. Last thing, as I say, Philip's been hard at work on the techie stuff. He's created a blog. It's to keep the word going out even more. And we can all do that, spread the word. People have handed out pamphlets on the C2C trains and be very inventive on how you get that information out, but please do get the information out. So, in just over a week, I think the community has done a fantastic job in getting to where we are. And as I said last night, I think you all deserve a round of applause. I've spoken far too much at the moment. A bit of audience participation. Give yourself 15 seconds or so, and what I want to do, I'm going to pick on some people, I'm going to put their hands up. I want you to think about a one-liner or one sentence. What do you want from the outcome of all the effort people put in towards this study? Give yourself 15 seconds, have a think, and I'll come around and nominate people to just stand up. Can you give me your name? And if you're not from this area, could you just say where you're from West Dunton or Dunton or wherever, just so we can get a feel of just how far we are reaching with our communications. That's right, I count slowly. Gary, how about you? What's your one-liner?
I don't want no big housing project on my doorstep.
Okay. All right. Lady there with the white scarf. I think it's a scarf. I've done it. That one, yes.
Like I said, I just wanted, to check what we've got. So when we've got Basildon, that's why I moved here. Spend many hours walking around the countryside of Ashford, and I just wanted to stay here.
Okay. Thank you. Gentleman there in the jumper.
There needs to be a proper feasibility study in terms of the amenities and access routes that we've got at the moment because they're overutilised.
Okay. Gentleman in the blue jumper, next row back.
I didn't hear it. Sentence, but it's to get
Try your best.
Well, I thought about it. To get the right outcome, but whilst addressing the need for more housing. So simply saying no won't do it.
Okay. Thank you. Well, why past politicians, you're going to have to work in a minute. David.
So this has not been a 5-minute plan should come to be put together. Have we any ideas how it's been going on? Under the radar?
I don't have the answer with, so you've got to try and find that out. Debbie?
I'm realistic enough to believe that we will end up with something, but certainly not what they're proposing. And it might be contentious, but the one thing I definitely do not want is any travellers or gypsies living on my doorstep.
Go for it.
I'd like the outcome to be a structured housing development of some sort, as long as it's in line with the amount of access and amenities that we have to match it.
Anybody else desperate to get in? I can bring the mic to you. It's all right, I've got one answer. There you go.
Thank you. I live at the back of Great Berry School. We've been here for 24 years. I'm not sure exactly how this project is supposed to go, but it's between Basildon and Brentwood, and it seems to me that Basildon's going to be at the front of it, because all this land, I don't know if there's done some road under Brentwood or Basildon, but I think Brentwood are getting the overfill away from where they are.
Anybody over this side of the hall? I'll pick on you, you don't volunteer.
I think I was just going along with the point that it seems as though they're putting out the worst case scenario and we've got to haggle down to what suits the majority. Might not be everybody's greatest.
All views are valid. Anybody else? Yep, good. I've got loads of volunteers over there. Which one first? Okay.
Has there been suitable investigation into brownfield sites? There are plenty of buildings that are abandoned and they are run down, and why use greenfield sites? It's an economic study was done in London, and they discovered that builders do not want to buy brownfield sites and redevelopment. They just want to do greenfield sites because they can make more money out of it.
Yeah, very true. Someone over here?
I think it's right to say that we need to be realistic and that there will always be a need for more housing, but I think I'd like to see an investigation or some challenges around the figures that are being bandied around as to what's needed in the local area. They seem to be at odds with what we're told comes from central government, what comes from the local councils, but the issue that concerns me is the use of the term affordable housing. I work for a housing charity. I won't name them because I don't have permission to be speaking on their behalf, but actually the local housing need isn't what is being provided for on this development. Local housing need is for the council estates where there is a lack of council housing, and affordable housing isn't affordable for the people that really need it. This development it's a false term that's being used.
Yep. Anybody else over in this corner? Nothing? You've got lots to say? No, okay.
I just agree with everything that they're saying, but it's the infrastructure is the main, one of the main important things, as Matthew said. Trying to get, whatever roads they've got on the site itself, they've got to get out and feed onto the 127, or try and get on the M25 between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the morning. Now, another, 10, 15,000 cars.
Anybody else? Yep.
Yep. I think they're just using too much space. They just want to build houses wherever they want to put it. It's always Basil that seems to get it, and Brentwood are getting away with it again, and we're stuck with the brunt of whatever they want to put out. That's how I'm fed up of it.
Can I just say, as a young girl, I lived in Baldwin Village, and at the same site, really, there was a proposal 25, 30 years ago for a place called Tillingham Hall to be built between Baldwin and West Horndon. And it seems to me that it's all labelled under a different name, but it's the same site, it's the same area, it was that side of the 128, and we're now looking at it from this side of the 128. But it's exactly the same area. It was proposed 30 years ago, and I have to say it was successful in being stopped then, and I hope that we can be as successful now. But I think what's really important is that Basil is a place that we can all be proud of, and we're not going to be proud of a place that is full of heavy transport, full of pollution. I want it to be a place that my children are proud to grow up in, and my mum is proud to grow old in.
Thank you. Obviously, should this construction sort of take place, I would like to ask a couple of things. I would like to know certainly that I would assume that they're going to have schools built in the area for children. And I would hope there are 1, maybe 2 or 3 doctor's surgeries. However, another thing that does concern me is if you look at 6,000 houses, you could be anything up to 25 to 30,000 people. And what worries me is the added pressure that's going to put on Basil Hospital. Because that hospital is struggling as much with the pressure it has to put up with on their A&E department, etc. Others do struggle because of the volume of people that are going through there. And it is a big concern from my point of view because, as far as I understand it, I don't know how many people we've got living in the southeast of Essex or South Essex, but it could be anything up to 800,000 people. But when you look at the whole stretch, you've got something like, I think it's Southend Hospital, Basildon Hospital, and Queen's Hospital, Romford. There are 3 hospitals that have actually got A&E departments. Can you imagine what an extra 20,000, 30,000 people is going to be putting on Basil? It's overstretched enough as it is, I think.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
There was a bit of paper the other day about Wickford. It's underdeveloped, you cannot get into it and out of it now. We will end up like that, that's what really concerns me. You can kind of drive around, but any more development, and I think you just won't be able to move, it will be blocked. And I cannot go and get a doctor's appointment for love nor money, a doctor's surgery, I have to wait a month to get my child a doctor's appointment. And what's going to happen with that? So, and the other thing is, someone put on the web the site that Wikipedia, they looked up how many houses are in Shepherd 100, and it's actually less than what this new development will be. And that really brought it home to me how big it's going to be. If it's as big as Shepherd 100, that really sort of hits home how big this is going to be.
As an old resident of Langdon Hills, we've put up with this development since 1948. Isn't it about time it all stopped and went somewhere else?
Okay, yeah.
I don't mind if I have a second go with a couple more sentences.
Go on then.
First of all, I have to fess up, although I'm a local resident, lived here for 40 years, I led the team in the Development Corporation that planned this area 30 years ago. So I've sort of seen it through, and obviously I'm proud of this area and the open space around it. Now I'm concerned about this proposal, but as I said earlier, there is a housing need and quite a few recognise this. And one of the things that struck me about this consultation is that we're being only asked about one proposal. It's quite normal these days in planning to be given, to be consulted about a number of options. So I think one of the key things that we need to ask is what options are being considered and perhaps we can comment on the other ones as well. I'm particularly concerned, like you, about facilities. The proposal we see here seems to be predicated on the possibility of a new railway station. Well, for the last 18 years I've been involved in planning of railways and railway facilities, and I think it's most unlikely there will be a new station. So whether it's the right location, I think is certainly questionable. So it's a lot of things to think about, and it's not just the number of objections, it is the substance of the points in them that's really going to count.
Thank you. Okay, that was... you have. Thank you very much. Right. Digest and hopefully action, or take some action on those. I'm going to hand over to Philip now for his audio-visual presentation, and I think you will find, shouldn't surprise anybody, just how well what you've just said is covered in his presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I first ask, can we dim the lights down a bit for the thing? If there's something.
So Basildon and Brentwood councils have entered into a joint consultation to build from 4,000 to 6,000 new houses on greenbelt land at Dunton. They've dubbed the plan Dunton Garden Suburb. They say it will have generous open spaces and be a place where people will want to live, work and relax. It sounds great, but what is the reality? Let's start by looking at the housing density. The councils have been a bit cagey about the size of the area that they want to build on, but I've drawn a square mile here over the plan to give some idea. From this we can estimate that the population density is going to be about twice what we're used to in Leindon and Langdon Hills. So there's no way that this is going to be the spacious suburb they want us to believe. The next point on many people's objections is the increased road traffic. Scenes like this will be familiar to anyone who has to use the A127 and its feeder roads in the early morning. The extra population will inevitably make matters much worse, as will all the other planned developments in the area. Even if they widen roads, there will be bottlenecks. How will they keep the traffic flowing? One of the few details we have for what the suburb is likely to include is a new train station. This sounds like a good thing, but it may not be. It will bring even more traffic into the area as London commuters head for the station car park. Roads will need yellow lines everywhere, but the biggest concern for us is the threat it poses to existing stations at Leindon and West Horndon. They may need to be closed to justify and finance a new station at Dunton. Schools have always been a hot topic in the West Basildon area. The new families of Dunton Garden Suburb will easily fill 2 to 3 primary schools and a large secondary school. All schools in the area are oversubscribed except James Hornsby, which has the capacity to take another 350 students. By the time they start building DGS in 2022, James Hornsby should be filled from other housing developments in the area. It will become oversubscribed, but it will be 2 miles from the centre of the Dunton suburb, so nobody will be able to get in from there. Already there are enough children to fill a large secondary school here. They take the bus to schools outside Basildon, so with DGS we really need 2 new secondary schools in the area, and if they're not included in the plans, there will be no space left to build them. It's the same story with health services. At local surgeries, we already have waiting times for appointments measured in weeks. At Basildon Hospital, even the car park is full. How will it cope with at least 10% more patients? And where will they find the doctors and nurses that are already in short supply? One of the most worrying features of the plan for local residents is the inclusion of traveller pitches in the new suburb. The eviction costs for Dale Farm and Hove Fields have created a lot of bad feeling around here. A study for the council now says that we should provide 240 new pitches by 2032 in Basildon alone. Now Brentwood want to add their needs and solve them by building a traveller camp straddling the border within Dunton Garden City. Just how big do they want it to be? Many residents here will object strongly to any traveller presence at all. Let's move on to something more fundamental, the loss of greenbelt land. England is now the most densely populated country in Europe. The greenbelt was set aside for a reason, to stop urban sprawl. Now, the councils have provided some rather dull-looking pictures of fields at Dunton, so I've taken the liberty of making some improvements to their brochure. We should not have to lose these beautiful spaces. Other councils are not doing this, and we don't think it is necessary to destroy greenbelt land anywhere. The council admit that the plans will have an impact on local wildlife. These meadows, ponds and trees are home to rare species such as the great crested newt and spotted woodpecker. Their habitats are protected by legislation. It is not good enough for councils to keep taking it away with the excuse each time that it's fine because there is still a little left. Another big environmental issue is flooding. This map shows areas that are prone to inundations, with the site of the suburb shown as the circle. They can't build on the western part of the site due to the flood risk, so that will remain as a green corridor. But the area they will build on is also waterlogged. Of course they will use surface drains, so the suburb itself won't flood much. But instead of soaking into fields, the water will quickly run off to the lower basin. Sorry West Horndon, you can expect a lot more of this. A less obvious problem is the district boundary between Brentwood and Basildon that runs through the centre of the site. It will mean that the residents to either side will have different services run by different councils. Furthermore, the Brentwood side will be paying Brentwood council taxes, but will rely on many amenities nearby in Basildon. Finally, the most heartbreaking aspect of the development is the impact it will have directly on the present residents of Dunton. Many face years of uncertainty followed by compulsory purchases of the land they live on. The residents of the Dunton Caravan Park have been given no idea of where they stand. It would be ironic indeed if they were kicked out to make way for traveller pitches. So, what of the upside? Councillors have pointed to new jobs, but mostly these will be temporary construction jobs. After that, we can expect more extra people than extra jobs. Of course, we need affordable homes for local people, but there are already many places where they are being built. These new houses are more likely to attract people from other areas where the councils are not sacrificing their greenbelt. And yes, we are told that it will help rebuild the Langdon shopping centre. But in fact there is already a new developer for that, and Dunton Gardens Suburb will not start being built until 2022. How can it be relevant? So why are they really doing this? And why have they tried to put such an unjustified positive spin on it? For such a major development, why have they not at least sent letters to us so that the people know that this is happening?
Things on video, and you can find that online. And it's remarkable how the councillors, there's a lot of arguments go on in those videos. It's not very pretty listening to, but when they came to this item, they were all agreed suddenly. It was almost miraculous. And there were lots of comments like this about how it's going to protect Brentwood's green spaces. And they made a unanimous decision to support the consultation.
Pretty shocking that, isn't it, that statement? Truthful? Oh, absolutely truthful.
Things are just as much rebuilt over that way. They were lucky that it's been situated where it has, because had it been a bit over, they would have been looking for our support rather than trampling all over us.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think really, I don't believe the council line we're getting that we have to build on greenbelt land somewhere. And the Billy Ricky Action Group has been looking at this for some time. They've done a study on this and they've said that it's not necessary. obviously we do need affordable homes, we need council houses, but there's a lot of development going on already on brownfield sites, and it's not obvious at all that we need to lose these greenfield sites. So even, I don't think we should be saying, oh, well, you know, Brentwood should be taking this, not us. I don't think we should be destroying the greenfield sites anywhere.
We had several acres of land in towards south end of Nottingham Council Group. They built several hundred or 4,000 or 5,000 houses on that. They got stopped. That's Nottingham Council.
I've seen that. Meridian.
What's the budget of the council to go ahead with? Why do they want this stuff?
Good question. Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's something we need to look at a bit more, because we haven't been doing this very long. The way I understand it is that they're not forced to build these houses, but there are a lot of grants that come from the government if they do build more homes. That's how I understand it. I need to look into that a bit more. So, you know, that might be part of the answer.
We need to understand what the actual figures are in the need for housing in the local area for local people. Turn the local people being used and the need for local housing. The local population doesn't require this amount of housing, and this style of accommodation isn't what's needed for local population. Their interpretation of local population growth is movement out of London into the area. And if people want to move in from London, buy the houses that are available. They don't need affordable housing schemes or council housing. They can just move in and buy what's available, like the rest of us have done. We need to find out what the actual housing need is for the area. It needs to be appropriate. What's being built needs to be appropriate for the size of the local population.
Like to, can't remember your name, sorry?
Mike Andrews.
Mike Andrews. Mike Andrews is from the Billericay Action Group. Would you like to stand up and make your point, Mike?
Yeah, just a couple of points that have been made tonight. This isn't like deja vu for us. You go back about a year, we had exactly the same. Half a dozen of us sat in someone's front room, and someone came along and said, do you know the council are going to concrete over our green belt? 430 homes in the field behind us. And we said no. Within 3 or 4 weeks, there were hundreds. We all thought there was going to be a letter from the council, but it never happened. As we said, they can't afford to do letters, but you can hire expensive consultants to run the planning department, not to send the letters. That seems very good news. We had a similar sort of starting point. The 2 meetings. Ours was a little bit different, though. The first meeting was a Billericay Town Council meeting. And we said, you know, you normally get 1 man and a dog. You think there could be a few more this time. So they hired a hall for 100 people. And it was full half an hour before the meeting was going to start, and the queue was going out the door. So the chairman of the town council said, well, tell you what, I'll call the police and evict you all. So the police were called, and nothing happened. I mean, this police car arrived outside, and some of the people went and had their photo taken. There are quite a few selfies of us protesters standing by a police car. So the next time they said, okay, we get a bigger hall. So they then got a bigger hall, but this time they didn't call the police, they got bouncers. Bouncers to ensure that there weren't more of us than should be in the hall. Now actually it went quite well, because the bouncers realised that we weren't a rabid mass, but we were there to just ordinary people, just like yourselves, going to sort of comment on these plans. The reason we were going was Billericay Town Council thought it was a wacko idea to build all these houses. And if I can just tell you some of the figures, we've been working on it for some time. We're talking here tonight about 3,000 on our side of the border, 3,000 on the other, 6,000 for Dunton. Actually, Basildon wants to build 16,000 homes in the borough. That's Billericay, Wickford and Basildon proper. Billericay, we get 2,300, and they're all on Greenbelt. And someone said the number you actually need. Our studies show that something like 8,500 is the natural growth figure in that period of time. So the 16,000 represents twice the number that we need for natural growth. The one thing I would say about getting someone to take notes at the meetings, I still haven't found anyone to do that. So someone said about the area, we represent, if you take the corridor from, say, Thurrock to Shoebury, we are a peninsula because we've got the Thames on one side and the Blackwater and the Crouch on the other. All our traffic flows go east-west, very few go to the north. that piece of area, we're about 20% of the surface area of Essex, and we've got something like 70% of the population. We're already one of the most densely populated areas. Bear in mind as well that every other council in the area is doing the same thing. So we talked about infrastructure, but forget the 16,000 here, because Castle Point want to build some homes, Rochford want to build some homes. If you use the trains, every one of those other councils is contributing to the problem that we're going to have trying to get on trains here. The same is going to go for the roads. So you have to look at things in this bigger perspective. Now, what we've tried to do is not so much address the don't build it in Billericay, build it somewhere else. We've gone back to that first principle, the 16,000. We believe that 16,000 is wrong, it's unjustified. There are lots of different ways that you can buy a consultant to tell you what number of homes you need to build. I've got to tell you, we had in the early days, we managed to get a session with Richard Moore, the chairman of the planning committee. And we asked the question, how do you know that your 16,000 number is the right one? And he said, we use the same consultants as everybody else. Well, that's justification for it, isn't it? You all use the same consultants, so I must get the right answer. Our own studies show that you could produce virtually any number from that 8,500 to about 16,000. And in fact, what Basildon have done is chosen the highest level that they could go for. Look at the size of the place, 16,000. Billericay is currently about 13,000 homes. So Basildon Council wants to build something bigger than Billericay, but field by field. Down in Bicester, they're going to build a new town of 13,000 homes. That's less, but that's going to be a new town. That's going to be a cohesive whole. That's going to have infrastructure. That's going to have hospitals and all the other things you need. In the Basildon local plan, well, it's 16,000 homes, and you just work your way around the county, find a few trees. Trees is a great one. You must have seen in the papers the last couple of weeks, Councillor Turner has discovered that trees are important. The Brentwood Gazette did, or the Yellow, one of these papers has done a study that's shown that we're all suffering because of the pollution in the air, and it's all because there aren't enough trees. So what Councillor Turner wants to do is cut down the trees where they exist on the greenfield and give them to build some new trees somewhere else. It's a bit like Robin Hood, isn't it? You can just imagine Councillor Turner with green tights and his little hat on, taking the trees from the people who've got the trees and giving new trees to the people who haven't got trees. It's a wonderful picture. Councillor Turner has got some other. He once said he was going to lie in front of the bulldozers, and we're still waiting. I think one thing I would say is that the issue here isn't so much about the specifics. I mean, we've all got our own specific areas, so that's how we started. But I think certainly we need to look at that bigger picture. It's the 16,000. If you weren't starting from 16,000, then a lot of the issues we currently have wouldn't exist. One other thing that has happened, this is a personal view, not a representation from BAG, but it does seem to me we are going to be like a dumping ground, aren't we? Because Chelmsford have decided to build 600-800 homes in Runwell, just on the corner of Wickford. Well, that's about as far as you can get from Chelmsford, as far as I can see. And now Brentwood want to build 3,000 here, outside here, which is about as far as you can get from Brentwood. So it does appear, if Kent could only get a raft and float it over, no doubt they could put some houses as well, and that get them away from Kent. I would say we suggested about talking to other groups. One thing that has happened over the last week, last Tuesday was Democracy Day, and we chose that to announce the formation of the South East Essex Action Group Alliance, and before long we'll be dropping the South East Essex and just call it ARGA, which is actually a number of local groups that are getting together to work together, to share experiences. We're all at different points in the argument. We're about a year old. There are other groups that are far more advanced. Malden, in fact, are at the stage of the public examination at the moment. But we've currently got 7 of the local action groups, and we're going to try and work together to understand where we can support each other, but really to address the 3 key issues that we see in this, which is one is the numbers, the second is the impact those numbers have on our green belt and infrastructure, and the third thing is, you might have heard a couple of years ago when the government started about this Localism Act. And localism is supposed to put power back in the hands of the local people, the residents. It's just a shame that our local councils haven't bothered reading the Localism Act. Because the third thing that we'll be addressing as a group is why it is that residents like ourselves have to form these groups. We shouldn't have to be forming. This should be part of the basic democratic process, is that we're included in the debate. Not just the landowners, not just the developers, not just everybody else. It just seems the only people that don't get involved in these things or have to do their own involving are the residents. So what I would say tonight is, and I'm really pleased to be here, we'll help in any way we can. And I have to say, everything that's been said, we saw this a year ago. It's exactly the same. What I would say is, well, how many people here knew that this piece of land was involved in a potential development?
Yeah.
Okay, that's one. So actually, it was last year. Because in last year's Basildon 2031 consultation that none of us got the letter for that told us it was going on, this was PADC 5.
That's right.
This was part of the local plan, the draft local plan that was put together last year. I mean, some of the Billericay residents took a while to find out. It's taken a year for this news to get through.
So we're talking about the council, and we're saying the council this and the council that, but these people are in positions that we vote for, aren't they?
I'll tell you another bit. I'll shut up now, but one further thing. We met some of our councillors, but you have to remember that Billericay only has one sort of councillor. We only have councillors from one party. We met some of our councillors last year, and one of them said to us, once you vote for us, we're not there to represent you, we're there to run the council. So it's not surprising that you've got the Billericay Action Group and the Dunton Action Group and every other action group. So, yeah.
The development, the consultation from last year you mentioned, wasn't that less than a quarter of the size of the suggested development tariffs rather than started last year?
Yeah, that's all right. The 2,300 was the figure that I've been told, yeah. Which is very similar to the numbers being brought. Bearing now in mind that would be the Basildon component. So 2,500 on Basildon, 2,500 Brentwood, roughly 5,000.
You say the Basildon Council want to build 16,000 houses. I'm a bit confused here. That's the government given targets. When I remember in the last Labour government, John Prescott gave targets to different councils. I remember it Stansted had 15,000 and Basildon was something like 8,000 at the time. So obviously we're going back a bit because it was in the Labour government when Prescott was running it. So doesn't the government have input here? Don't they tell?
Well, this is an absolute classic. So it depends at what time of the day, I think, that you ask the question that you get the answer. So I've been to one of the Basildon cabinet meetings. I'm sure Linda was there at the time, a couple of months ago, where the numbers came up, and virtually every one of the Conservatives on Basildon Council said, no, do with us, it's government. They told us, don't do that, we can't challenge them. Yet, when you go to them and say, the government's setting the target, oh no, the government says it's local councils that set the targets. The trouble is, if the local council doesn't set the target that the government wants, that it hasn't set, then the planning inspector doesn't let through your plan, and you're back to square one. So, I don't know who you believe. I mean, I guess we have to say that there are certainly activities going on in the background which would suggest what number a council is expected to achieve. But the formal position, I believe, and I'm sure Linda can advise us, is that it's the council that makes that final decision. But if it makes the wrong decision when it goes to its full inspection in front of the planning inspector, then it gets turned down.
That wasn't the case. It may be that now, it wasn't.
That seems to be the case now.
I remember John Prescott telling, and those were the actual figures. Stansted was 15,000 over a period of 5 years, or whatever it was. I think Basildon was 8,000. So we've gone back, 6 or 7 years now. Yeah. So it wasn't the case. It was definitely government told local authorities, or some councils, they're these targets.
It's very similar to the argument over the Greenbelt. If you listen to the sound bites from the centre are that we don't build on Greenbelt. Most exceptional circumstances. But then we'll see that that's the reason that we're here and lots of other groups is that our local councils are trying to build on Greenbelt. But then the argument from the centre is, well, it's the local council that decides if it wants to build on Greenbelt. So the government says you don't build on Greenbelt, but doesn't really say you shouldn't build on Greenbelt because it's the local council that can decide if it really wants to. Like everything, there is no clear, as far as we can see, no clear answer for any of it. There will be sound bites and the reality will be hidden away in some more complex document that we never get to see. That is what guides the planning inspectors.
Is it still 16,000 more homes than we've already had built already? Because we've got Ford's Dunton already being done, we've had Markham's Chase has already been done.
This is one of the arguments we've got, that we produced a white paper that analyses where the numbers come from. And in fact, we've just got a new issue coming out, well, it's sort of in the air at the moment. One of the areas is clearly that windfall, the ones that have already been built, we believe they've not been incorporated.
No, and they've already done loads of Liquid as well, haven't they?
Okay.
Can I just ask a question from last night's minutes? You said, in the minutes it said, this is an unfunded development and Basildon Council still has yet to make even more savings. What do you mean by this is an unfunded development?
I don't think anyone has looked at the actual money that it's going to cost, because there is no absolute information on are we going to have one school, no schools, 3 schools, surgeries. So I don't think it's been costed.
So who's actually proposed this? Is it like Bellway Homes have come along and said we proposed this, or is it actual Basildon Council who's selling its own people down the river?
I think we'll get an answer to that one. Okay, right. What I'm going to do now is, thanks very much for that. That was really good input.
I recognise some faces in the room, but for those who don't know me, I'm Langdon Hills Ward Councillor, Allport-Hodge, and I'm your UKIP Borough Councillor. There is another Borough Councillor that represents Langdon Hills, and Stephen Hillier, who I don't believe is here tonight, but I do believe he spoke at yesterday's meeting. Okay, I think it's excellent that Derek is engaging with cross-party politicians. But I wanted to say a couple of things. The first was the job for you personally. You really do need to respond to the consultation. I did read in the paper that it had been extended, I do believe. Might have got that wrong because I get like headlines through my press notification. Extended. But, you know, don't digitalise and extending. What I will say, when you respond to the consultation, sort of park any emotional comments that you may have at the back door. Focus, because you're up against planners, council officers, you're up against the National Planning Policy Framework within which they operate. Concentrate on all of the things that you've heard here tonight, the flooding, the impact on the infrastructure, not least of all the loss of the green belt, natural habitat, all of those things. When they're being assessed at the other end, they are the critical issues that they will be reading and looking at. That's just a word of advice. I would also put in an official complaint about the fact that this was just sort of dropped on you, wasn't it? There was no leading time. You've got 6 weeks to put in your views on what is probably one of the biggest issues to face this ward in a long time, and not a minor issue at that. So if you feel aggrieved that you weren't properly informed about this consultation, then say so. Put that in your notes. Right, so coming to me then, obviously what I imagine you'll want to hear is where do I stand, basically. And I'll tell you first and foremost, I stand here, I was elected, not by all of you, but by the majority of you, in the May elections. I've never ever been involved in politics before. Like Derek, I headed a grassroots campaign group, fighting Essex County Council to keep my son's school open. And I have to tell you, I won against Essex County Council. So I am a fighter, I will get my teeth stuck in. But first and foremost, I'm here to represent your views. But actually on this one, it's very, very easy. You know, it's a bit like Marmite UKIP, isn't it? You either love us or hate us. But on this issue, basically, it's pretty easy for me to tell you that you will have my support. Predominantly, coming back to some of the comments that have been raised here, I did listen to basically, or I did read in depth the Billericay Action Group's submission that was made to the council. My view on it, it was phenomenal. It saved me a great deal of research, and as a direct result of that, I have asked our Chair of Scrutiny and Commission, Overview and Scrutiny Commission, to indeed undertake a scrutiny of whether or not we actually need 16,000 new homes, and I might add 49 hectares of employment land. I actually think it's a grossly over-assessed need. Coming back to some of the questions that was asked, I call it smokes and mirrors. Smokes and mirrors, basically, where the blame can be laid. What happens is the government come out with a national planning policy framework. The local authorities, in this case Basildon Council, has to work within that framework. But there is a great deal of local interpretation that goes on, and as I've already said, we, as in UKIP, and I am the group leader at Basildon for the UKIP group, we want to know whether those numbers are right in the first place, and whether or not we can get those reduced, and therefore take some of the burden off of the development on the local area. Coming back to where did this all start, it started with a memorandum of understanding, and that was an agreement that was discussed and agreed between Brentford Council and Basildon Council. And for those of you who are not in the know, Basildon Council is basically a Tory administration at the moment, although it's a minority administration. There is no coalition, so whilst UKIP had 2 members on the cabinet, that's for a very, very good reason. You wouldn't go into an executive position without any training and profess that you can take over the organisation overnight. Our view is, we're on a training and we had really people work around it very, very quickly. So there is no coalition. There's 5 Tory councillors on the cabinet and there are 2 UKIP, and that's what they're called.
It's not a parliamentary candidate for Basildon South and Thurrock East. Can I firstly say that I think local residents owe a huge debt to Derek and his very small team for having galvanised so much action so quickly in the light of a very second-rate consultation exercise being undertaken by the council. And I thought that the audio-visual presentation was superb in summarising the issues. Because to me, the very first key thing is the green belt around Basildon. Basildon was a planned town. As many of you may know, I'm a City of London councillor. I chair the Corporation's Open Spaces Committee, which looks after 11,000 acres of open space in north, south, east and west of London, the nearest one here being Epping Forest, which was acquired by the city to stop it being built on 125 years ago. And we saw what happened in between the 2 wars in the last century, when there was no planning control and you got lots of ribbon development. You go down the A127 and the old Southend Road and you see it. And we don't want that sort of thing happening here in Basildon. And this village, so-called Garden City or Garden Village, is just another way of describing what would be urban sprawl. So can I reiterate the points that others have made? It's very important that there's a large amount of written representations, both by snail mail or electronic means, to the council before the closure of the deadline. And I think that the issues are very clear, that the first thing that ought to happen before there's major development is a proper open consultation and discussion by the council with all residents as to the numbers of houses which are needed over the next 20 years, and then the sites that could be available, both the 6,000 brownfield sites which should be used in priority, and then ones outside. And it's not a case of trying to win by setting Basildon against Billericay or Basildon against Brentwood. I agree with you totally, sir. That is not the way to achieve it. We have to have a dispassionate view about what is the right number of houses for local needs and the best place for them. And when we look at the issue of travellers' sites, Basildon, in my view, has already got more than its fair share, and we need to look at an Essex-wide situation, and other districts within Essex need to step up to the mark before more is added to Basildon. With that.
I'm a local ward councillor for UKIP for Lee Chapel North Ward, so it's not quite here, but it's not far away. I don't want to say an awful lot. I agree with what my colleagues have said, and most of what Byron has said as well, about the needs and the lack of consultation that there's been and all of that. I'm totally with you on that, and I'm here to fight for your interests insofar as it spreads to the council. I've got a slogan for you. When you asked 15 seconds, I thought of something, and it's "Don't dump on Dunton." You can use it. No. No royalties. No royalties. No. You can take that for free. Okay. Greenbelt is what is key on this, and what I see in this is that Greenbelt is very sacrosanct when it comes to places like Brentwood and Billericay, but when it comes to Basildon, it's a different story altogether. And Greenbelt is dispensable in Basildon, but it's sacrosanct in Billericay and Brentwood, and that is why you've got this proposal now. It's Brentwood's way of dumping on Dunton, dumping on Basildon, and that's what it's all about, so that's why we've got to fight it. The other thing I want to say is that when we talk about the council, let's understand what we mean, because the council is the councillors, us, in session. That, strictly speaking, is the council, and ultimately we make the decisions. But a lot of it is done by the council's officers, and they have an awful lot of power, and they can do an awful lot of things that we don't even get to know about. I didn't even know about any of this until a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'm a councillor. So that's how under the radar a lot of this stuff is. Anyway, I don't want to say take up a lot of time, but I'm totally on your side. It's totally inappropriate, and without the infrastructure, it's completely unacceptable.
Thank you. When you're on the bus or when you're in the supermarket, if anyone has got pamphlets that they want to download from our Facebook site, please do so and spread them around your roads and so on. We're trying to reach out to other action groups. It's good that Mike's here from Billericay and Daniel's giving information about Dunton. We'll work hard on that. I'd like to try and get a meeting with the local politicians, Stephen Metcalfe and John Barron, and the council officers. What I want to do, I come from the IT industry, and all industries have got jargon. What I'd like to do is to get a meeting with the council officers, and in layman's language, draw me a picture of Basildon. Tell me what you're putting where.
I mean, even tell us that.
I'm assistant as well, Lisa. And that's, we really need to get a full-up picture. Okay, establish meetings with other action groups, which is, I think that's going well. Come up with an easier group name. Dunton Garden Suburb Action Group. Any suggestions? Chase your politicians. There's a website called They Work For You. You can log on to that and it leaves by the hand, by postcode, who your MP is and whatever. Make your feelings known. We all know what's happening in May. Pressurise them, all of them, irrespective of the colour of of the rosette.
I didn't know that. I didn't know they were for us.
Yeah, we do.
Speaking to the council planning officers the other day, although the cut-off date is supposedly 17th of February, due to the upcoming elections, there's no decision likely to be made until after that. So we may, after the 17th, you know, we'll still be trying to reach out to other groups because we're getting prepared for, hopefully it won't be necessary. You know, if the full council can kind of pull this back, but, you know, we want to be prepared this time. Okay, I'll close down and thank everybody. Thank you for...
That just says it all about
Right.
the way about how it is.
Very quickly, a lady from Dunton. It's actually, I think, disgraceful. I will read it quickly. As you probably know, Dunton has a total of 240 residents and 170 of those live in Dunton Park and are elderly. There are only 12 children in Dunton Village that I know of. We feel that the council is picking on our community because we are so few in number. We also feel the council will abandon us to developers if this plan is to go ahead. And we can be bullied out of our homes. And they mentioned the developer's name, but then she asked me to withdraw that, so I've used that politician's word, redacted. We were first notified on the 18th of December via a letter invitation to attend an event on the Dunton Garden Suburb consultation. This invite only was sent to all landowners within the site boundary. One resident who was a bit controversial and has many previous battles fighting planning with Basildon Council did not receive an invitation. How strange. The meeting, and this is the bit that really upset me, the meeting was a complete joke. They organised us into groups, split us into couples, so I was not able to sit on the same table as my husband, and basically tried to sell it to us as a good idea. There were also, she mentioned the group of people, but she wasn't sure whether they were planning land nations or whatever, so again I've crossed that out. Presents who have already purchased land, and they were allowed to comment and sit together. The drawings indicate that the listed buildings will remain, but sadly not the Victorian cottages or the St Mary's, I think she's done a typo there, Rectory and Old Church Hall. The cottages were built to support Sumter's Farm, the old Poplar Union Workhouse. In my opinion, this is a massive part of Basildon District history. Totally agree. The Dunton Residents Association and its members are 100% against this development. Thank you again for setting up the Facebook page. Those bully boy tactics, when I read that, I walked away from my computer screen for 10 minutes. And then I went back, and I just think any council who can, you know, support that is absolutely deplorable. Right. Okay, thank you everybody. Keep spreading the word.